This was the cause of my car being pretty stinky every time I drove it around. So that's what we'll be fixing today. Today we're going to be replacing the axle boot on a 2006 Subaru Baja. It's similar to most Subaru's axle boots. I was experiencing a smell whenever I was driving my car around, especially after I went uphill. It smelled hot, but the car was not running hot. You can, open your engine bay and look in and see what the problem is. The grease that's splattered everywhere that you just saw is what makes the smell. So the mechanic estimated it would be $250 for each axle in parts and labor. They replaced the whole axle, not just the axle boot. So you have the option to do that, but it can be a time-consuming and sometimes frustrating process. So weigh the value of your time versus your money and decide what you want to do before you start this project. So the tools that you need today are a 19 wrench, a 19 socket, a 12 socket, flathead screwdriver, really something just to wedge and pry, and a snap ring pliers. You'll also need a jack stand, and something to take the wheel off your vehicle. We're using a jack and jack stands to get our car off the ground. We've got a good spotter. He's doing a good job. There's actually a docking point on Subaru Baja, so it makes it easy for you to get the jack connected there. Make sure that you have a stable point of contact, and then the jack frames can just go on the jack stands can just go on the frame. We took the wheel off with a 19mm socket. We have an impact drill, so it's a lot easier than just doing it by hand. And I have the Crosstrek wheels on my Baja. I think it looks pretty good. Just remember that you saw it here first.
Yep.
We're going to use a 19mm socket to get these bolts off. Make sure that you notch the bolt so you can see where it goes back in place once you're done. It's probably a good idea to get your car aligned anyway, but this just gives you kind of a guideline to make sure that everything's in place. Then you need a 12mm socket for the wire sensor there. So once we get this off, this is going to give us access to the axle boot, and that's when the real fun starts. You're going to clip off the boot. It's probably pretty broken apart, and then the CV joint should come out. We actually pulled a little bit too hard, and it was difficult, so sometimes your differential slips out a little bit, and you're going to have to push it back in place. And this is where the real fun begins. You're going to need to use those snap ring pliers to get the ring off. This took us quite a while. You might need to take a break, come back. That's what we did, and we got it on the first try. So just take it easy. Don't let yourself get frustrated. This is the hardest part of the whole process. Then you're going to install the new boot. This is a universal boot kit. They didn't have the one in stock for us, but we'll go ahead and put a link at the bottom for the one that fits specifically for the Baja. This one's a little big, but it'll serve its purpose for us. Once you get the boot back in place, go ahead and put the grease in that's included in the boot repairing kit. It's a messy job, so gloves are always a plus. Then you can go ahead and put your joint back on. You'll use the same ring that you removed to replace it. You'll replace it with the same ring that you started with. This is a little bit easier than taking it off, but also if you're having trouble, just go slow. And there you go. So once that's done, you'll just slide the joint back in. This took a little bit of alignment. Again, it is convenient to have a second set of eyes and hands just to make this whole process a little bit easier. And from there, it's pretty straightforward once you get it in. You slide the boot up and we can use the rings that were included in the kit. They're pretty okay. You'll see us put it on the top. The rings that were included in the kit we put on the top, and then we just went ahead and used a hose clamp for the bottom because for us that's a little bit easier. They may be a little bit more expensive, but as you can see, the difference between how you can easily get them on and connected is pretty nice. So you'll make sure to pull it tight as it will go. Then you can see you bend it back, and then you'll bend the tabs down. And this just makes sure that that it stays in place. After you're done getting it secure, you'll want to go ahead and just give it a little trim. Then you can see for the bottom clamp, we did decide to use a hose clamp because we had a little bit trouble securing the tabs on the top ring. So it would add a little bit of cost, but again, your time, your money, decide which is more important to you. And speaking of, I did save about $250 doing this at home. It was going to be about $250 each axle, so it was going to be a $500 project because we needed two on my car. So for us, it is a little bit of frustrating, you know, it's taking some time, but we just took an afternoon to do it. So it just depends on kind of what you want to do there. Now we're going to start the process of putting everything back together. So you're going to use the 12mm socket again to get the sensor wire in place. As you can see, he always uses a screwdriver to kind of hold the unit up. That's kind of a good idea, just to give you a a spacer and something to hold it there. This can be a little bit of a pain. I'd say it's probably the second most painful part of the process, just to kind of make sure that everything is lined up. Remember that you have made a notch in the top bolt the first time whenever you're taking it apart, so make sure to go ahead and line those up whenever you're putting it back together. This is where it's really good to have a second set of hands. I helped push forward the hub to help line everything up and get it all back together. You really have to kind of muscle it back in there, so if you have somebody else you can call in for backup, now's the time to do it. And put your tire back on. Again, this is the 19mm socket that we were able to use for that, and our electric impact drill makes this a pretty easy process. I've been driving on this about 2 weeks since we did it. It's, like I said, pretty aligned, but I can tell that once we get the other boot done, we're going to need to go ahead and get an alignment.